The dust-coated stagecoach rattled into Black Hawk, Colorado. As Clara Phillips clutched her wrinkled letter and stared anxiously through the window at the small mining town that would become her home. After traveling for weeks from Boston, the 22-year-old had arrived to meet the man who had promised her security and a future in the West, a future that was now as uncertain as the shifting sands of the plains she had crossed. Clara stepped down from the coach, her travel-worn blue dress catching on the metal step. Her trunk and 2 valises landed with a thud beside her as the driver tipped his hat and climbed back onto his perch. The September sun of 1875 beat down relentlessly, and Clara squinted against the brightness, wondering if her groom might somehow have been delayed on his way to town. "Miss, you waiting for someone?" asked the station master, a gray-whiskered man who eyed her luggage with mild concern. "Mr. Frederick Willoughby," Clara replied, forcing confidence into her voice. My intended. We arranged to meet today." The station master's expression shifted. "Willoughby, madam, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Frederick Willoughby left Black Hawk 2 weeks ago. Packed up overnight, something about a gold strike in Montana territory." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. 2 weeks ago, just when she'd sent the telegram confirming her arrival date. "There must be some mistake," she said, her throat tightening. "We've been corresponding for months." "He sent for me. He paid my way." The station master shook his head. "No mistake, miss. He's gone." Clara fought back tears as the reality of her situation sank in. Alone in a strange town with limited funds and no connections, she found herself suddenly without prospects or protection. Her family's small farm back east had failed after her father's death, and this marriage was to be her salvation. Now what was she to do? As she stood paralyzed with indecision, a tall man emerged from the saloon across the street. His confident stride and the way other townspeople nodded respectfully in his direction suggested he was someone of importance. He wore a dark Stetson pulled low, a well-worn leather vest over a cotton shirt, and carried himself with the easy grace of a man accustomed to the saddle. He crossed the street toward the stage-coach station, and as he drew closer, Clara could see the silver star pinned to his vest. The town sheriff, then. He tipped his hat to her as he approached the station master. "New arrival, Bill?" the sheriff asked, his voice carrying a slight drawl. "Yes, Sheriff Evans. Miss here was expecting to meet Frederick Willoughby." The sheriff's expression darkened. "Willoughby," he repeated, turning his attention to Clara. His eyes were a startling blue against his sun-bronzed skin. "I'm Sheriff Adam Evans, madam, and you would be?" "Clara Phillips," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. "Mr. Willoughby and I had an arrangement, a marriage arrangement." Understanding dawned in the sheriff's eyes. "Another one," he said quietly, then seemed to catch himself. "Miss Phillips, I regret to inform you that you're not the first lady to arrive in Black Hawk expecting to meet Frederick Willoughby. He's developed quite a habit of inviting mail-order brides and then disappearing before they arrive." Clara gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. "But why would anyone do such a thing?" "The stage fare," the sheriff explained grimly. "He collects money from multiple women, promising marriage, then uses their travel funds for his gambling and prospecting schemes. Leaves town just before they arrive." The station master nodded. "Shameful business. Third lady this year." Clara's legs threatened to give way beneath her. She reached for the bench outside the station, lowering herself carefully. "What am I to do now?" she whispered, more to herself than to the men standing before her. Sheriff Evans studied her thoughtfully. After a moment, he removed his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. "Miss Phillips, if you'd allow me, I'd be happy to escort you to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. She's a good woman with a comfortable establishment. You can rest there while you consider your options." "I have very little money left," Clara admitted, mortified by her circumstances. "I spent nearly everything I had on this journey." The sheriff nodded, his expression softening. "Don't worry about that just yet. Mrs. Henderson's taken in women in your situation before. Black Hawk might be a mining town, but we've got good folks here." Clara hesitated, but what choice did she have? She nodded her acceptance. "Bill, would you have these sent over to Mrs. Henderson's?" Sheriff Evans asked, indicating Clara's luggage. Then, offering his arm to Clara, he said, "Miss Phillips, if you're ready." Clara took his arm, grateful for the steadiness he provided. As they walked away from the station, the sheriff glanced down at her, his expression unreadable. "Willoughby's loss will be someone's greatest gain, Miss Phillips," he said quietly. "You seem like a fine lady. Don't let this setback dim your spirits." Clara managed a wan smile, her heart still heavy with disappointment and worry. "Thank you, Sheriff Evans." "Adam," he corrected gently. "Just Adam is fine when I'm not arresting anyone." As they made their way through the dusty streets of Black Hawk, Clara couldn't help but notice the curious glances thrown their way. A woman alone in a mining town was a curiosity indeed, and she wondered what whispers would follow her arrival. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house stood at the end of Pine Street, a neat two-story structure with white curtains in the windows, and a small garden struggling to survive in the arid climate. The proprietress herself opened the door before they reached it, a stout woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Sheriff Evans," she greeted, then looked Clara over with understanding. "Another one of Willoughby's girls." Clara flinched at the description, but Adam nodded. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Miss Clara Phillips from Boston. Miss Phillips, Mrs. Martha Henderson." "Come in, child," Mrs. Henderson said, her tone softening. "You look dead on your feet." The boarding house interior was clean and modestly furnished, with a parlor to the right and a dining room to the left. The smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air, reminding Clara that she hadn't eaten since early morning. "I have a room available on the second floor," Mrs. Henderson said. "Small, but it has a window that catches the morning light." "Mrs. Henderson," Clara began hesitantly, "I must be honest. My financial situation is—" "We'll work something out," the older woman interrupted. "I could use help around the house." "Can you cook?" Clara nodded eagerly. "Yes, and so too. I'm quite good with a needle." "There you have it," Mrs. Henderson said with satisfaction. "Room and board in exchange for help until you get your bearings." Sheriff Evans nodded approvingly. "Miss Phillips's luggage should arrive shortly. Bill's sending it over." "Thank you, Sheriff," Clara said, relief evident in her voice. "I'll check on you tomorrow, see how you're settling in," he replied, replacing his hat. Something in his expression made Clara think he might have said more, but he simply tipped his hat and took his leave. Mrs. Henderson showed Clara to her room, a small but tidy space with a narrow bed, washstand, and chest of drawers. A window overlooked the small garden behind the house, and beyond it, the mountains rose majestically against the blue Colorado sky. "Rest now," Mrs. Henderson said. "Supper's at 6. We can talk about your duties then." Alone at last, Clara sank onto the bed and allowed herself the tears she'd been holding back. She wept for her lost hopes, for her foolishness in trusting a man she'd never met, and for the uncertain future that now stretched before her. When the tears finally subsided, she washed her face and changed from her travel-stained dress into a simple navy skirt and white shirtwaist. By the time she descended for supper, Clara had composed herself and was determined to make the best of her circumstances. The dining room held a long table set for 8, though only 5 places were occupied. Mrs. Henderson at the head, 2 elderly gentlemen who were introduced as Mr. Peterson and Mr. Collins, a young schoolteacher named Miss Winters, and now Clara. We have 2 mining engineers staying with us as well, Mrs. Henderson explained as she served a hearty stew, but they often work late shifts. The conversation over dinner was polite, with the others tactfully avoiding asking Clara too many questions about her arrival. Mr. Peterson, a retired banker, spoke of the town's growth since gold was discovered in 1859, while Miss Winters discussed her challenges teaching the children of miners and merchants alike. The town's changed a great deal, Mr. Collins noted. Not so wild as it once was, thankfully. The sheriff keeps good order. Sheriff Evans seems very capable, Clara commented, remembering his kindness earlier that day. Adam's a good man, Mrs. Henderson agreed. Been sheriff for 3 years now. Before that, he was a rancher over near Denver but came here after his wife passed. Clara felt a pang of sympathy. I didn't realize he was widowed. 5 years now, Mrs. Henderson said. Influenza took her and their infant son, hit him hard, sold the ranch and took the badge here for a fresh start. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Clara found herself thinking about the sheriff with his steady gaze and quiet strength. He had known loss too, yet had found a way to rebuild his life. After dinner, Mrs. Henderson showed Clara the kitchen and laundry areas, explaining the routine of the boarding house. Breakfast at 7, dinner at noon for those who come home for it, and supper at 6, she said. Mondays are laundry days, Tuesdays for baking, Wednesdays for mending and such. Clara nodded, committing the schedule to memory. I'll do my best not to disappoint you, Mrs. Henderson. The older woman patted her hand. You'll do fine, child, and when you've had time to settle, we'll think about your future. Black Hawk might not be what you expected, but there's opportunity here for those willing to work. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the town distant piano music from the saloon, the occasional shout or laugh, the wind rustling through the pine trees behind the house. Her thoughts turned to Frederick Willoughby, the man who had written such promising letters, describing a comfortable home and a respectable business awaiting her arrival. Had any of it been true? Or was it all fabrication designed to separate her from what little money she had? And then there was Sheriff Evans. His kindness had been unexpected, his eyes holding a depth of understanding that had comforted her in her distress. Willoughby's loss will be someone's greatest gain, he had said. The words replayed in her mind as she finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Clara rose early, eager to prove her worth to Mrs. Henderson. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, where she found her hostess already at work in the kitchen. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," Clara greeted her. "How can I help?" The older woman smiled approvingly. "You can start the coffee and then mix the biscuit dough. Breakfast will be simple biscuits, eggs, and bacon." Clara set to work, grateful for the familiar tasks that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. By the time the boarders began drifting into the dining room, she had helped prepare a hearty breakfast and set the table with precision. "This is the best coffee I've had in months," Mr. Peterson declared after his first sip. "Mrs. Henderson, you found yourself a treasure." Mrs. Henderson beamed. "Miss Phillips is indeed proving herself useful." Clara blushed at the praise, serving the remaining boarders before taking her own seat. As she ate, she considered her next steps. She would need to write to her aunt in Boston, explaining what had happened and reassuring her that she was safe. Perhaps she should inquire about employment opportunities in town. Surely a growing settlement like Black Hawk would need seamstresses or shop assistants. After breakfast, as she was washing the dishes, there was a knock at the kitchen door. Mrs. Henderson opened it to reveal Sheriff Evans, his hat in his hands. "Morning, Martha," he said, then nodded to Clara. Miss Phillips, I trust you slept well. As well as could be expected, Sheriff, Clara replied, drying her hands on her apron. Thank you for asking. I've been making inquiries, he said, accepting Mrs. Henderson's offer of coffee, trying to trace Willoughby's movements. He withdrew a considerable sum from the bank before he left, which suggests he had no intention of returning. Clara sighed. I should have been more cautious. My aunt warned me about responding to such advertisements, but I was desperate after my father died and we lost the farm. Adam's expression softened. Don't blame yourself, Miss Phillips. Willoughby is a practiced confidence man. He knows exactly how to appear trustworthy in his letters. Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat. Clara has agreed to help around the boarding house for room and board until she decides what to do next. A sensible arrangement, Adam approved, then hesitated. Actually, I might have another option to propose if Miss Phillips is interested. Clara looked at him questioningly. My sister, Rebecca, runs the mercantile with her husband, Thomas Grant. They're looking for help, especially with the dressmaking and millinery side of the business. Rebecca mentioned it when I told her about your arrival. Clara felt a flutter of hope. I'm an excellent seamstress, Sheriff. My mother taught me from a young age, and I worked for a dressmaker in Boston for 2 years before coming west. Perfect, Adam said, a smile warming his features. Would you be willing to meet with Rebecca this afternoon? Say around 2 o'clock. Of course, Clara agreed eagerly. Thank you for thinking of me. It's the least I can do, he replied, finishing his coffee and standing to leave. I'll come by to escort you to the store. After he left, Mrs. Henderson gave Clara a knowing look. The sheriff seems quite concerned with your welfare, my dear. Clara felt her cheeks warm. He's simply being kind, Mrs. Henderson. It's his duty to look after the town's residents. Mrs. Henderson murmured noncommittally. Well, finish those dishes and then you might want to press your best dress for your meeting with Mrs. Grant. The hours until 2 o'clock passed quickly as Clara helped with the household chores and then carefully prepared for her meeting. She chose her gray silk dress, the most practical of her better garments, and arranged her chestnut hair in a simple but elegant style. She was ready and waiting in the parlor when Sheriff Evans arrived promptly at 2. You look lovely, Miss Phillips, he said as she joined him on the porch. Thank you, Sheriff, she replied, falling into step beside him as they walked down Pine Street toward the center of town. I appreciate your introducing me to your sister. Rebecca's a fine woman, Adam said. She and Thomas have been married for 12 years now. They have 3 children, Daniel, who's 10, Sarah, 8, and little Joseph, who's just turned 5. It sounds like a wonderful family, Clara commented, thinking wistfully of her own dreams of marriage and children, dreams that had been so cruelly dashed by Willoughby's deception. Adam seemed to sense her thoughts. Miss Phillips, he said hesitantly, I hope you don't think all Western men are like Willoughby. Most of us keep our word. Clara managed a smile. I'm trying not to judge an entire region by one man's actions, Sheriff. Good, he nodded, seeming relieved. And please, I meant it when I said you could call me Adam. Then you must call me Clara, she replied, feeling a small thrill at the informality. They reached the mercantile, a substantial 2-story building with large display windows showcasing an array of goods from household items to mining equipment. A bell jangled as they entered, and a woman who shared Adam's blue eyes looked up from behind the counter. Adam. And you must be Miss Phillips, she said warmly, coming around to greet them. I'm Rebecca Grant. Welcome to Black Hawk. Rebecca Grant was a handsome woman in her early 30s, with Adam's dark hair streaked with just a few strands of silver. Her manner was brisk but friendly as she shook Clara's hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Mrs. Grant, Clara said. Sheriff Evans Adam mentioned you might need help with dressmaking. Indeed we do, Rebecca confirmed. Our last seamstress left to get married 3 months ago, and I've been struggling to keep up with orders while managing the store and my family. Thomas handles most of the hardware and mining supplies, but I need someone with real skill for the fabric and notion side. She led Clara to the back of the store, where a small area had been set aside for fabric, patterns, and finished goods. We carry ready-made items from Denver, but many of our customers prefer custom work. Can you also handle alterations? Certainly, Clara assured her. I worked for Madame Laurent in Boston, who was quite particular about fit and finish. Rebecca's eyebrows rose. Impressive. Would you mind demonstrating your skills? Perhaps a simple alteration to start. For the next half hour, Clara worked on taking in a ready-made shirtwaist that had been returned as too large, while Rebecca watched and Adam wandered the store, occasionally chatting with customers who came in. Your stitches are nearly invisible, Rebecca marveled, examining Clara's work. And so quick, you've done in 30 minutes what would take me at least an hour. Clara smiled, pleased by the praise. Thank you, I've always enjoyed needlework. Well, the position is yours if you want it, Rebecca declared. We can offer $1 per day to start, with room for advancement as you prove yourself. You'd work 6 days a week, with Sundays off. It was a fair wage, especially considering Clara would continue to have room and board at Mrs. Henderson's. I accept, she said without hesitation. When would you like me to start? Tomorrow morning at 8 if that suits you, Rebecca replied. I'll show you our current orders and introduce you to our regular customers. As they walked back to the front of the store, Adam rejoined them, his expression hopeful. How did it go? Your Miss Phillips is exactly what we need, Rebecca told him with a smile that made Clara blush. She starts tomorrow. Adam's face lit up. Excellent, I knew you two would get along. After finalizing the details, Adam escorted Clara back toward the boarding house. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as they walked, and Clara found herself relaxing in the sheriff's company. Thank you again, she said sincerely. You've been so kind to a complete stranger. Adam shook his head. Not a stranger anymore, Clara. And kindness is something we all need from time to time. As they reached Mrs. Henderson's gate, Adam hesitated. Would you allow me to call on you properly this Sunday? Perhaps we could attend church together and then take a walk if the weather holds. Clara was surprised by the invitation but found herself nodding. I'd like that very much, Adam. His smile was warm as he tipped his hat. Until Sunday, then. Clara watched him walk away. A curious feeling of anticipation, replacing some of the disappointment and anxiety that had been her companions since arriving in Black Hawk. Perhaps this unexpected detour in her life's journey wasn't a disaster after all, but the beginning of something she couldn't yet imagine. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Clara settled into her new routines. Mornings and evenings were spent helping Mrs. Henderson with the boarding house duties, while her days were filled with learning the workings of the mercantile. Rebecca proved to be a patient teacher and a kind employer, introducing Clara to the regular customers and explaining the preferences of the town's more prominent citizens. Mrs. Judge Wilson likes her collars very stiff, Rebecca advised as they sorted through the current orders. And Mrs. Davenport always wants extra trim, even when it's not strictly fashionable. Clara absorbed these details, grateful for Rebecca's guidance. By the end of her first week, she had completed 3 new dresses, altered 5 ready-made garments, and begun work on a wedding dress for the banker's daughter. You're a godsend, Rebecca told her on Saturday afternoon as they closed the shop. Business has increased just by word of mouth about your skills. Clara smiled, pleased by the praise and the sense of accomplishment. "I'm enjoying the work. It feels good to be useful again." "Adam's been asking about you," Rebecca mentioned casually as they tidied the workroom. "He says you're attending church together tomorrow." "Yes," Clara confirmed, feeling a flutter of nervousness. "He's been very kind." Rebecca's expression grew serious. "My brother doesn't extend invitations lightly, Clara, not since Caroline died." Clara nodded, understanding the significance. "I'm not looking to rush into another arrangement, Mrs. Grant. I've learned my lesson about hasty decisions." "Rebecca, please," the other woman corrected. "And I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I just wanted you to know that Adam's interest is genuine. He's a good man who deserves happiness." "As does everyone," Clara replied softly. Sunday dawned clear and mild, a perfect autumn day. Clara dressed with care in her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. She had just finished pinning her hat when Mrs. Henderson called up that the sheriff had arrived. Adam stood in the parlor, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his Sunday best, a dark suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, with a crisp white shirt and string tie. His eyes lit up when Clara entered the room. "Good morning," he greeted her. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," Clara replied, noting how different he appeared without his badge and gun belt. Somehow more approachable, yet still unmistakably the man of authority she had come to know. The church was a modest white clapboard building at the edge of town, its single steeple rising hopefully toward the cloudless sky. As Adam escorted Clara inside, she was acutely aware of the curious glances from other churchgoers. Clearly, the sheriff attending services with the new seamstress was cause for interest. Rebecca waved them over to join her family in their pew. Thomas Grant, a stocky man with friendly eyes and a receding hairline, shook Adam's hand and welcomed Clara warmly. Their children, well-behaved but fidgety as children will be during services, regarded Clara with undisguised curiosity. The service itself was simple but heartfelt, with a sermon on perseverance that seemed particularly appropriate to Clara's circumstances. She sang the hymns with genuine feeling, finding comfort in the familiar rituals that remained the same even as everything else in her life had changed. Afterward, there was a flurry of introductions as it seemed everyone in Black Hawk wanted to meet the newcomer who had arrived under such dramatic circumstances and was now walking out with the sheriff. Clara did her best to remember names and faces, aware that these people might become not just customers but friends and neighbors. When they finally extricated themselves from the church crowd, Adam suggested they walk to the small park at the center of town. The day had warmed pleasantly, and several families were enjoying picnic lunches on the grass. "How are you finding Black Hawk so far?" Adam asked as they strolled along the gravel path. "Better than I expected," Clara admitted. "Everyone has been so welcoming. Mrs. Henderson, your sister, the customers at the store, even the miners who come in for supplies are unfailingly polite." Adam smiled. "We might be a mining town, but most folks here are decent. Those who aren't usually find themselves facing me in an official capacity." "Have you always wanted to be a sheriff?" Clara asked, genuinely curious about this man who had so unexpectedly become her champion. Adam shook his head. "No, I was content ranching, but after Caroline and the baby died." He paused, his expression shadowed by old grief. "The ranch held too many memories. When the previous sheriff retired and the town council approached me, it seemed like a sign, a chance to start fresh and do some good." "I'm sorry for your loss," Clara said softly. "Mrs. Henderson mentioned what happened." "It was 5 years ago now," Adam replied. "The pain never completely goes away, but it changes, becomes something you can live with." They walked in companionable silence for a moment before Adam spoke again. "What about you? Did you always want to be a seamstress?" Clara smiled at the question. "I always loved creating things. My mother taught me to sew when I was very young. But no, I had dreams of being a teacher once. I even attended a semester at the normal school in Boston before my father fell ill and I had to return home to help with the farm." "You could still teach," Adam suggested. "Black Hawk's growing. We might need another teacher soon." "Perhaps someday," Clara acknowledged. "For now, I'm grateful to have work I enjoy." They continued their walk, the conversation flowing easily between them. Adam told stories of his childhood on a farm near Denver, his time as a rancher, and some of the more amusing incidents from his years as sheriff. Clara shared memories of Boston, her family, and her dreams for the future. As they completed the circuit of the park, Adam hesitated. "Would you care to have dinner with me this evening? Mrs. Callaghan's cafe serves a fine Sunday roast." Clara felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "I'd enjoy that very much, Adam." He escorted her back to the boarding house with a promise to return at 6. Clara spent the intervening hours helping Mrs. Henderson and reflecting on the unexpected turn her life had taken. A week ago, she had arrived broken-hearted and betrayed, certain that her future was in ruins. Now, she had employment, a place to stay, and the prospect of new friendships, perhaps even something more with the thoughtful sheriff who had come to her aid. Dinner at Mrs. Callaghan's proved delightful. The cafe was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and fresh wildflowers in simple vases. Mrs. Callaghan herself, a red-haired woman with an Irish lilt to her voice, greeted Adam warmly and welcomed Clara to Black Hawk. "The sheriff doesn't bring ladies to my establishment often," she confided to Clara as she showed them to a table. "You must be special indeed." Adam cleared his throat, looking slightly embarrassed. "Mrs. Callaghan enjoys teasing me," he explained after the woman had gone to fetch their meals. "I don't mind," Clara assured him. "It's nice to see that people care about you." The roast was as good as promised, accompanied by potatoes, carrots, and fresh baked bread. Clara ate with hearty appreciation, suddenly realizing how tense and unhappy she had been during those last months in Boston, struggling to make ends meet after her father's death. "You seem more relaxed today," Adam observed, his blue eyes warm in the lamplight. "More like yourself, perhaps." Clara considered this. "I think you're right. I've spent so long worrying about survival that I'd forgotten what it's like to simply enjoy a moment." "Life in the West isn't always easy," Adam acknowledged. "But there's a freedom here, a chance to rebuild that draws people like us." "People like us," Clara echoed, curious. "Those who have lost something and are looking for a new beginning," he clarified. "Most everyone in Black Hawk came from somewhere else, bringing their hopes and dreams with them." As they finished their meal, the door to the cafe opened, admitting a well-dressed man in his 30s whom Clara recognized from church that morning. "Evening, Sheriff," the man said, approaching their table. "Miss Phillips, Clara, this is Howard Thornton," Adam introduced them. "He owns the assay office and the bank." "Pleased to meet you formally, Miss Phillips," Thornton said, his smile revealing teeth too perfect to be natural. "I understand you're working for Rebecca Grant now. A fortunate development for our town." "Thank you, Mr. Thornton," Clara replied politely, though something in his manner made her uneasy. "I won't interrupt your dinner further," Thornton said, his gaze lingering on Clara longer than necessary. "Good evening to you both." After he moved to his own table, Adam leaned forward slightly. "Thornton's been trying to buy up property around town, has big plans for Black Hawk's expansion." "You don't approve?" Clara asked, noting the reservation in Adam's tone. "I think growth is inevitable, but it should happen naturally," Adam replied. Thornton wants to rush things, bring in more gambling halls, saloons. I prefer to see homes, schools, businesses that serve families. Clara nodded her understanding. A community rather than just a boomtown. Exactly, Adam said, looking pleased that she grasped his concern. As they walked back to Mrs. Henderson's in the gathering dusk, Clara felt a deep contentment settling over her. The day had been nearly perfect from the church service to their walk, and now dinner with conversation that ranged from serious to light-hearted. At the boarding house gate, Adam took her hand gently. Thank you for a wonderful day, Clara. May I call on you again? I'd be disappointed if you didn't, she replied honestly. His smile lit his entire face. How about Tuesday evening? You could join me and Rebecca's family for dinner at their home. I'd like that, Clara agreed. Impulsively, she leaned forward and placed a brief kiss on his cheek. Good night, Adam. His expression of pleased surprise stayed with her as she entered the boarding house, where Mrs. Henderson was waiting with poorly concealed curiosity. Had a nice evening, did you? The older woman asked, pouring Clara a cup of tea. Lovely, Clara confirmed, not minding the questions. Mrs. Henderson had been too kind for Clara to resent her interest. He's a good man, the sheriff, Mrs. Henderson observed, not one to trifle with a woman's affections. I believe that, Clara said softly, and I wouldn't trifle with his. Over the next few weeks, a pattern developed. Clara worked diligently at the mercantile during the day, continued to help Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house, and spent increasingly more of her free time with Adam. They attended church together on Sundays, shared meals several times a week, and took walks when the weather permitted. October passed into November, and the aspens on the mountainsides turned to gold before shedding their leaves. The first snow dusted the peaks, a harbinger of the winter to come. Clara found herself more settled and content than she had been in years, her initial disappointment over Willoughby's deception fading into something like gratitude for the chance it had given her to build a new life. The mercantile thrived with Clara's contributions. Her dressmaking skills attracted customers from neighboring settlements, and Rebecca was delighted with the increase in business. Thomas, too, showed his appreciation by building Clara a better work table and installing additional shelves for her growing inventory of fabrics and notions. At the boarding house, Clara had become an integral part of the household, her cooking and baking skills particularly appreciated by the other boarders. Mr. Peterson often declared that her apple pie was the best he'd ever tasted, while Miss Winters sought Clara's advice on fashionable adaptations for her modest teacher's wardrobe. But it was her deepening relationship with Adam that brought Clara the most joy. He was everything Willoughby had falsely claimed to be: honest, hardworking, and genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. They shared stories from their pasts, dreams for the future, and increasingly, a sense that they were building something meaningful together. I never expected this, Clara admitted one evening as they sat on Mrs. Henderson's porch swing, bundled against the November chill. When I arrived and discovered Willoughby's deception, I thought my life was ruined. Adam took her gloved hand in his. I've been thinking about what I said that first day, about Willoughby's loss being someone else's gain. I remember, Clara said softly. I didn't realize then that I would be that someone, Adam continued, his voice low and serious. But Clara, I thank God every day that Willoughby was fool enough to leave before you arrived. The sincerity in his blue eyes made Clara's heart skip. As do I, Adam. He leaned forward then, his lips meeting hers in a gentle kiss that nonetheless contained a promise of deeper feelings. Clara responded naturally, her hand moving to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm when they parted. Adam's smile was tender. I should go, he said reluctantly. "But I'll see you tomorrow for dinner at Rebecca's." Clara nodded, too full of emotion to speak. She watched him walk away into the darkness, her fingers touching her lips where the warmth of his kiss lingered. Inside, Mrs. Henderson was waiting with her usual cup of tea and knowing smile. "That man is smitten with you, my dear," she observed. "Has been since the day you arrived." Clara couldn't deny it. "The feeling is mutual," she admitted. "Is it too soon, do you think? We've only known each other for 2 months." Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "Time isn't always the best measure, Clara. Some people know each other for years without truly connecting. Others find that connection in moments." The older woman's wisdom comforted Clara as she prepared for bed that night. Perhaps things were moving quickly with Adam, but it felt right in a way that her correspondence with Willoughby never had. There was no deception between them, no false promises, or hidden agendas. The next evening, dinner at Rebecca and Thomas's home was a lively affair. Their children had grown fond of Clara, especially 8-year-old Sarah, who had shown an interest in learning to sew. After the meal, while Thomas and Adam discussed town business and Rebecca supervised the children's bedtime preparations, Clara helped clear the table and wash the dishes. "You fit so well with our family," Rebecca commented as they worked. "The children adore you and Adam." She paused, smiling. "Well, I haven't seen my brother this happy in years." Clara felt a flush of pleasure. "He makes me happy too." "I know," Rebecca replied. "It shows on both your faces." "Have you spoken of the future yet?" Clara shook her head. "Not explicitly, but I think we both know where this is heading." Rebecca squeezed her hand affectionately. "I'm glad. You deserve happiness after what you've been through." Later, as Adam walked Clara back to the boarding house through the crisp night air, she found herself thinking about Rebecca's question. They hadn't discussed the future in concrete terms, but Clara could no longer imagine her life without Adam in it. The thought both thrilled and frightened her. "You're quiet tonight," Adam observed, his arm warm around her shoulders. "Tired, just thinking," Clara replied honestly. "About how much my life has changed since coming to Black Hawk." Adam nodded, understanding in his expression. "Good changes, I hope." "The best," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I still can't believe how differently things turned out from what I expected." "Life rarely follows the paths we plan," Adam said thoughtfully. "Sometimes the detours lead us exactly where we need to be." At the boarding house gate, he hesitated, seeming to wrestle with something. "Clara, I'd like to ask you something, but I'm not sure if it's too soon." Clara's heart quickened. "Ask me, Adam." He took both her hands in his expression serious in the lamplight that spilled from the boarding house windows. "I love you, Clara Phillips. I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood so brave and determined despite everything that had happened. I know we've only known each other a short time, but I can't imagine my life without you in it now." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes. "I love you too, Adam, more than I thought possible after everything that happened." His face lit with joy, but he wasn't finished. "Then would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not right away, we can wait until spring if you prefer, or even longer, but I want you to know my intentions are serious." Clara didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Adam Evans." He gathered her into his arms then, his kiss deeper and more passionate than their previous embraces. Clara returned it with equal fervor, her heart so full it seemed impossible that it could contain such happiness. When they finally parted, both breathless, Adam pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't have a ring yet," he admitted, "but I'll get one as soon as possible." "I don't need a ring to know your promise is real," Clara assured him. "You've shown me every day what kind of man you are." Adam smiled, kissing her once more, briefly but tenderly. "We'll tell everyone tomorrow," he decided. Starting with Rebecca and Mrs. Henderson, Clara nodded, already imagining the pleasure their news would bring to those who had supported them both. "Good night, Adam. I love you." "I love you too," he replied, his voice warm with promise. "Sleep well, my Clara." That night, as Clara prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. If Frederick Willoughby had been the honest man he'd claimed to be, she would now be his wife, living a life built on deception. Instead, she had found genuine love with a man whose integrity and kindness had been evident from their first meeting. The next morning, Clara could barely contain her happiness as she helped Mrs. Henderson prepare breakfast. The older woman noticed immediately. "Something's happened," she observed, eyeing Clara shrewdly. "You're positively glowing." Clara couldn't keep the secret any longer. "Adam asked me to marry him last night," she confided, "and I said yes." Mrs. Henderson's face split into a wide smile. "Praise be!" she exclaimed, embracing Clara warmly. "Oh, my dear, I couldn't be happier for you both." The boarders, when they came down for breakfast, were equally delighted with the news. Mr. Peterson insisted on opening a bottle of sherry he'd been saving for a special occasion, and Miss Winters immediately offered to help with wedding preparations. At the Mercantile, Rebecca's reaction was just as enthusiastic. "I knew it," she cried, hugging Clara tightly. "When Adam stopped by early this morning with that ridiculous grin on his face, I guessed what had happened." Thomas, too, expressed his genuine pleasure, clapping Clara on the shoulder in his friendly way. "You've brought life back to my brother-in-law," he said. "We're all grateful for that." The day passed in a blur of congratulations as word spread through the small town. By closing time, it seemed everyone in Black Hawk knew of the engagement between Sheriff Evans and Miss Phillips, the seamstress who had arrived as a disappointed bride to be only to find true love instead. That evening, Adam came to the boarding house for dinner, having been invited by Mrs. Henderson to join the household's celebration. He looked both proud and slightly embarrassed by all the attention, but his joy was unmistakable as he took his place beside Clara. "To Sheriff Evans and Miss Phillips," Mr. Peterson toasted, raising his glass. "May their future together be blessed with happiness and prosperity." "Hear, hear," chorused the other boarders, lifting their glasses in agreement. After dinner, Adam and Clara retreated to the parlor for a few moments of privacy. "I spoke with Reverend Miller today," Adam told her, taking her hand in his. "He's available to marry us any time after Christmas, if that suits you." "Christmas is only a month away," Clara said, both excited and nervous at the prospect. "Too soon?" Adam asked, concerned. "We can wait longer if you prefer." Clara considered this. "No, not too soon. Perhaps mid-January. That would give us time to prepare properly, and for me to finish the wedding dress I've been making for the banker's daughter." Adam smiled. "January it is. And Clara, I want you to have whatever kind of wedding you desire. Simple or elaborate, it's your choice." "Nothing too elaborate," Clara decided. "But I would like a proper ceremony with our friends present, and I'll make my own dress, of course." "Of course," Adam agreed, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "And afterward, would you be comfortable living in my home?" "It's not large, but it's solid and well built." Clara had seen Adam's house, a neat one-story structure on the eastern edge of town. "It's a lovely home," she assured him. "Though perhaps we might add a sewing room eventually. I could continue taking commissions even after we're married." "Anything you want," Adam promised. The south-facing bedroom would make an excellent sewing room, plenty of natural light. They continued discussing their plans, the future unfolding before them like a road stretching toward the horizon. Clara felt a deep contentment, knowing that this time her journey west had led her to the right destination after all. The weeks leading up to Christmas passed in a flurry of activity. Clara divided her time between her work at the mercantile, helping Mrs. Henderson prepare for the holiday, and making plans for her January wedding. In her precious spare moments, she worked on her wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace trim that Rebecca had specially ordered from Denver. Adam, meanwhile, enlisted Thomas's help in making improvements to his house. They added shelves in the kitchen, built the promised sewing room, and purchased new furniture for the parlor. Each change was discussed with Clara, who found herself increasingly excited about the home they would share. Christmas itself was a joyful celebration. The boarding house was festooned with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, and Mrs. Henderson outdid herself with a feast that included roast goose, mincemeat pies, and a Christmas pudding brought all the way from England years ago as part of her family traditions. Adam joined them for the meal, bringing gifts for everyone. For Clara, he had a small velvet box containing a ring with a delicate sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It reminded me of your eyes the day we met," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger, full of courage despite everything. Clara's gift to Adam was a hand-stitched quilt she had worked on secretly during the evenings, each square representing something from their courtship: a church for their first Sunday together, pine trees for their walks, a star for his sheriff's badge. "It's beautiful," Adam said, visibly moved as he traced the intricate stitching. "No one has ever made something so personal for me before." The days between Christmas and their January wedding date seemed to fly by. Final preparations were made, invitations delivered personally to everyone in the small community, and Clara's dress was completed with Rebecca's enthusiastic approval. "You'll be the most beautiful bride Black Hawk has ever seen," Rebecca declared as Clara tried on the finished gown. On the morning of January 15, 1876, Clara woke early in her room at Mrs. Henderson's. The day she had once imagined spending with Frederick Willoughby had arrived, but with a very different groom awaiting her. She felt no regrets, only gratitude for the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. Mrs. Henderson and Rebecca helped her dress and arranged her hair with orange blossoms sent from Denver for the occasion. The mirror reflected a woman Clara barely recognized, confident, joyful, loved. "Ready, my dear?" Mrs. Henderson asked as they prepared to leave for the church. Clara nodded, her heart full. More than ready. The church was filled to capacity when Clara arrived. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the wedding of their sheriff and the seamstress who had become such a valued part of their community. As the music began and Clara started her walk down the aisle on Thomas Grant's arm, standing in for her late father, she had eyes only for Adam. He waited at the altar, tall and handsome in his new suit, his face alight with love as she approached. When Thomas placed her hand in Adam's, the rightness of the moment brought tears to Clara's eyes. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Miller began, his voice carrying through the hushed church, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. Clara and Adam had written their own vows, promises of love and fidelity that reflected their journey from strangers to beloved partners. When Adam slipped the gold band onto Clara's finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes clear with certainty. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Miller concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Sheriff Evans, you may kiss your bride." Adam's kiss was tender but possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers as they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Adam Evans. The celebration afterward at the town hall was festive and joyous. Everyone contributed something. Mrs. Callaghan provided the wedding cake, the miners' wives brought dishes for the feast, and Mr. Peterson donated several cases of wine from his personal collection. Music, dancing, and laughter filled the afternoon and early evening hours. As the celebration continued, Howard Thornton approached the newlyweds, his expression unreadable. "Congratulations to you both," he said formally. "Mrs. Evans, you've made quite an impression on our town in a short time." "Thank you, Mr. Thornton," Clara replied, noting the way Adam's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "Sheriff," Thornton continued, "I hope your new domestic arrangements won't distract you from our ongoing discussions about the town's development." Adam's smile remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened slightly. "My wife supports my vision for Black Hawk, Mr. Thornton. If anything, my commitment to ensuring this town remains a good place for families is stronger than ever." Thornton nodded, seeming to accept this for now. "We'll speak again soon," he said before moving away. "He doesn't give up easily," Clara observed quietly. "Neither do I," Adam assured her. "But let's not worry about Thornton today. This is our celebration." As the evening drew to a close, the guests lined up outside the hall to wish the couple well as they departed for their new home. Rice and flower petals showered down upon them as they made their way to the waiting buggy that would carry them the short distance to the house that was now theirs together. Once inside, with the door closed against the world, Adam gathered Clara into his arms. "Welcome home, Mrs. Evans," he said softly. "Home," Clara repeated, the word filled with meaning. "I never thought I'd find one so far from where I began." "Are you happy, truly?" Adam asked, searching her face. Clara's answer was in her kiss, in the way she pressed herself against him, in the love that had grown between them through the autumn and winter months. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she whispered against his lips. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The disappointment that had seemed so devastating had led her to a love deeper and truer than anything she could have found with Frederick Willoughby. "What are you thinking about?" Adam asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "About how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best," she replied honestly. "If Willoughby had been waiting for me that day, I never would have met you." Adam pulled her closer. "His loss my greatest gain," he murmured, echoing the words he had spoken on that first day. "I'll spend my life making sure you never regret choosing me, Clara." "I already know I never will," she assured him, settling into the circle of his arms. "This is where I was meant to be all along." The years that followed proved the truth of Clara's words. Black Hawk continued to grow and prosper, becoming the community Adam had envisioned rather than the gambling haven Thornton had desired. The Evans home expanded as well, with the addition of a larger sewing room where Clara continued her work, now teaching young girls the skills her mother had passed to her. In the spring of 1877, their first child was born, a son they named James, after Clara's father. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth. Their family was completed in 1881 with the arrival of another boy, William. Their home rang with children's laughter and the everyday sounds of a happy family. Adam served as sheriff for 10 more years before being elected mayor of Black Hawk, a position that allowed him to further shape the town's development. Clara's dressmaking evolved into a proper shop adjacent to their home, where she employed 3 assistants and offered the latest fashions from Denver and beyond. On cool autumn evenings, they would often sit on their porch swing, watching their children play in the yard and reflecting on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. The disappointment that had once seemed so devastating had led Clara to a life richer and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined on that dusty day when she first arrived in Black Hawk. You ever wonder what became of him? Adam asked one such evening in 1885, a decade after Clara's arrival. Willoughby, I mean. Clara considered the question. Occasionally, she admitted, but only to wish him well wherever he is. Without his deception, I wouldn't have you our children this life we've built. Adam smiled, taking her hand in his as they had done countless times over the years. The silver beginning to thread through his dark hair only made him more handsome in Clara's eyes, the lines at the corners of his eyes testament to a decade of smiles and laughter. His loss, Adam said softly, will always be my greatest gain. And mine, Clara agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder as the sun set behind the mountains that had become her home. In the gathering dusk, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life and love, Clara Evans knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged. Not as a mail-order bride to a man she had never met, but as the beloved wife of a man who had seen her courage and worth from the very beginning, a love story that had begun with disappointment but blossomed into a lifetime of joy.